very exam oriented. So you only care about passing the exam, you don't care about anything else. You don't think about how is this connected to this, you know. So with all of that, there's a sense of children being kind of numbed or shut down or closed off from being alive and curious and dynamic. So there's a sense we have to undo the damage of many things. We have to undo the damage of the school system, we have to undo the damage of poverty, of other kind of factors that are inhibiting them from really being able to flourish, right? And partly, of course, this is not only for them, there's going to be a cost for the society if we don't do it. You know, in the sense that on the one hand, we're missing out on their potential. The other hand is if they don't achieve their potential, they're going to become a drag in some way in terms of social systems or healthcare or the police or judicial system, right? So we realize we have to find a much deeper way of working. So a couple of areas we're looking at is, one is with the vocational training center, we're thinking, can we make it into something like a community college? Because we've been talking to some colleagues in India who are part of a network of community colleges. So it's just like the community college in the US. It's intended to open up pathways for people whose education has stalled at a lower level. You know, either at high school when they finished or before they finish if they drop out, right? So we're kind of looking at that idea, can we make a shift like that so it becomes an institute that can work that way, and also become an institute that can house like youth programs that are much more integrated as well, right? A second area is that we've been asked to set up like a women's shelter for young women, because there are many young women who are victims of abuse, who will often have to carry a child to term, but then the child is going to be given off for adoption. But they need a transitional space to be able to live. And this approach has come both from the government and also from women's organizations. And in the past, we have hosted women like that. And 3 young women, we actually got college sponsorships and sent them to India to do their degrees. You know, so suppose from coming as being quote unquote a victim of abuse, they've actually been able to rebuild their lives by pursuing education. So that's a kind of a second area we've been looking at. The third one, which is the one I've been presenting here, is we have looked at a program, and for now we've called it a leadership program for young women. Because as you will know, in our community, it's a bit of you will see 2 different aspects to women in education. On the one hand, you know, very highly accomplished women who are doctors, who are engineers, who are accountants, who are lawyers. Thank you very much. And on the other hand, in many families still holding back girls from education. You know, if you get into university, okay, but otherwise come back, be at home, get married, you know, that kind of approach to them, right? So there are a lot of cultural barriers also for them. And also because, as you know, we put restrictions on how they can move, where they can go, who they can interact with. So all of it also is very stifling, right? So I remember once, because we had a girls' home, and we had some international visitors came, and they of course want to talk to the girls, right? The girls didn't say a word. The warden is saying, "Kadayingo Hullil, Kadayingo Hullil," right? After a word, right? Then of course after they went, I was having a chat with the warden. I said, listen, if every day in their life they are hearing "Kadayingo Hullil," and then all of a sudden one day you're saying "Kadayingo Hullil," how is that going to happen? It's not going to happen, right? So we need to look at something that is much different. And also what we thought is that for many young girls, by the time maybe they get some exposure to the idea that just like men, they have a right to strive, to be ambitious, to seek to fulfill their talents. By the time they get exposed to something like that, the major decisions in life have already been taken. You know, because say in their mid-20s only they read a book like that or hear somebody talk like that. Already what they study has been decided. Who they marry has been decided. So it's a bit too late to have any major impact on their life. So what we thought is, can't we do something when they're earlier, before they say like just post A-level. And one of the reasons we picked post A-level is because with our university youth, you can't catch them at the same time. Because unlike in America or Australia, university holidays are not at the same time. Colombo is at one time, Beradini is at another time, Jaffna is at another time. So you can never plan to get university youth together, say April holidays, any university youth can come for this program, you can't do it. Because they're all over the place, right? So only this post O level or post A level, they have a chunk of time where youth are available. You can try to reach them. Right? So we have just this year we have piloted this program, and in fact tomorrow, day after, they're finishing and graduating. This young program for young women post A level, looking at multiple dimensions of their lives and about learning and developing as people. So I'll walk you through this with the slide presentation because that has the details on it. The broad goal is that they have to become self-directed in learning, and particularly to connect it to their lived experience, their own life experiences, to develop critical thinking and understanding, intellectual curiosity, and develop practical capacities and skills that will be helpful in work placements. The other is build body awareness and physical strength. As I said, often in our cultures, we don't like girls to be physically active. We worry it's bad for their health and all of this. So often they're not physically very strong, which means they're not very resilient also. Any illness, anything just knocks them out, right? And also they're not very aware of their own body and feelings and everything. Right? And then the last is, as I said, we'll frame it in the perspective of the rights of women. As young women, what are their rights in terms of how they live and what they can aspire to. Right? So I said the first area is called body work, a lot of physical activity. So it includes things like yoga, capoeira, which is a Brazilian martial arts. One of the reasons for that is, especially for girls, it gets them moving their bodies in ways that normally as Tamil girls they're not supposed to be moving, so they be much more energetic and active. Stretching, which is what they're doing here. Then different kind of games, volleyball, even frisbee, just to get the energy levels higher and their physical, their awareness of their own body. So, for example, in the left slide on the left in the middle, in the white T-shirt, is a Sinhalese woman, Jayanti Guru Dumbala, who was the first Sri Lankan to climb Mount Everest.
Really?
Yeah, and she went up obviously with a team who guided her up. But as you can look at her, she's not particularly big or muscular or anything, right? So it shows them that physical strength or willpower, strength, what that can be about, So this is just some more of those exercises. And then we say mind work. So mind work is becoming knowledgeable and thinking about different areas. So one is about the economic rights as women, about gender and culture, about gender equality of men and women, cultural stereotypes around what women are supposed to be like, power relations in society, then about healthy relationships. A huge problem with young people around relationships. They don't know what is a good relationship, a bad relationship. Tamil cinema is completely a disaster for this. They put up with things that are basically stalking, that is considered love, So a lot of things that we have to give them an opportunity to talk about it, right? Then learning about historical context of places. So for example, they're working at our church in Batiklo, so we teach them a bit about the history of the church, about the place in Batiklo, as a way for them to think about the history of any place. So when they go back home, they can think about the history of their family's house in the village, in relation to broader historical things, right? And then we do practical classes also, like English classes and computer classes, right? Because one of the things we are aware is that when we're talking to when they talk to the parents as to why they're coming for this, our culture, which is so pragmatic, they'll be thinking like, what is all of this stuff to do with this? So they say, no, we'll get English classes and computer classes. Then they say, okay, maybe it's a good thing. So we build those in as well. And anyway, because they need it, but we connect all of it to the rest of the class. So when they're doing English classes, they will be reading a lot of things connected to say, women who are role models or social movements around women's rights and things like that, right? So the language learning and the rest of the course are integrated, right? And then lastly is nonviolent communication. This is actually something that was developed in California by somebody called Marshall Rosenberg or something, I think, right? We're not sure about the last name. As you know, we joke with us Tamils that we are particularly fractious, right? Families, social institutions, politics, right? A lot of conflicts. and often seemingly about things that are not that important, when you look at the actual issue is, right? So a lot of this is what you might call is really like emotional intelligence, right? About them becoming aware of their own emotional needs, what's happening within themselves, as a way of then also empathizing and thinking about how others might be, where they might be coming from. So starting to help think of that in terms of then how they communicate around difficult issues, so that you can start to minimize conflict in this, right? To avoid it. And then they do site visits. So these are often site visits connected to a lot of women's organizations and work they have done or are doing in Batiklo, or there are centers for them. So Manachola is a center connected to Surya Women's Development Center, and they went there for a 25th anniversary program there. And then these are different places that they visited. This is a picture of Sunila Abhyasekara, who some of you may know was a human rights activist, Women in Media Collective. She was very active in, and she passed away, and she had a connection to Surya, so they were unveiling a portrait of her.
Which is Surya?
Sunila, in the portrait?
I know.
Yeah. And then we break it up into sessions, because initially we had thought of 4 solid months or 5 solid months of residence. But the resource people were finding it very intense, being every day with them, 15, 12 young people, going through discussions, activities, right? So they said it's better to do 3 weeks and you take a break, let them go home for a week, then they come back for 3 weeks, then they go home for a week. So we broke it up into sessions like that. And then this part is starting to connect now to the history, as it were, of our region. So one is about the history of women and women's organizations in the north and east. Then the work that Tamil Muslim and singular women have sometimes done to try to connect to each other in spite of the conflict. Then they've been engaged with people working with mothers of the disappeared. So looking at what has been the burden that women have borne as often as family members, looking for those who are missing. How do you remember memorialization? Then looking at historical change in religious communities, because often, particularly for women, the norms about how to be a woman often come from religious teachings or practices, right? But it's to show how these have often changed from time to time. From what we dress, what is seen as acceptable, unacceptable, has changed sometimes every 25 years. Then we looked at women's labor struggle, women workers and their struggles. And then environmental activism and challenges. And what we call barefoot economics is about, again, with grassroots economies at community level. So it's this movement from being active about your body and strengthening yourself, to thinking about yourself, to then making a connection to your community's history and how are these connecting with each other. So for example, they do site visits like to the market, and then they'll talk to the women and others who are selling the produce, like who grows the produce, who is selling it, who's marketing it, who is controlling the activity, who's making income out of it. Then they visited a field site which is also for waste management. So they're finding about issues of our waste, which is such a huge problem, right? And how are we dealing with it or not dealing with it? And then the history of the place also, right? This is a very bad massacre that took place in 1990. It was one of a series of several massacres in Batiklo. This one was committed by the army, perhaps using Muslim home guards also. So they were talking to somebody who was a survivor, not a survivor, but is from that community, because there was only one survivor of the massacre. And then later they were also taken to Katangudi, where the LTT had attacked Muslims who were worshipping at the mosque. So they were getting just listening to people, starting to be aware of all of this, thinking through what it means for them. And this is a group they were meeting with women who worked with mothers of the disappeared. So they were talking to them how it has affected their lives with the 20 odd years they've been searching, right, for answers in Batiklo. And then these are some things with computer classes. They said that our vocational training center conducted for them. And then we have English classes also. And we're quite fortunate that we have a lot of international researchers who come to Batiklo and spend time there working with us. And many of them have been quite generous in how they work with young people. So they were willing to be like the English instructors. So the one on the right is a professor from Germany, but she was just there and she said, I'll be the English tutor. The one on top is doing a PhD at Chicago, and both of them speak Tamil quite well. The one on the left happens to be my wife, but she's also was helping with teaching English classes for them. And I can see they often do it outdoors, make it more informal, interactive. And then we do artwork. So they did things like make eco-friendly newspaper bags, and then body mapping. As you can see, they've drawn a thing of the body, mapping it out, their understanding of it, questions of who am I, and then para drumming also that they did. So this is some of the artwork that they did. You can see these eco-friendly cards and things that they're making. So you print cards, you can print bags. And this is some of the work that they're doing. And then, as somebody said, from artwork we get to heart work, right? So they do this is activities again helping them to integrate a lot of this, so reflecting on themselves and their lives. So the river of life is an activity using the metaphor that life is like a river, right? It doesn't go in a straight line. It has twists and turns and bends where it has encountered different things. So the idea of helping them to think through what have been painful occasions in their life, or happy occasions, or difficult occasions. And then they use storytelling and journaling. And then they also did a reflection on the Easter bomb attack. They use that also as partly something that's affecting their lives. It was interesting that they had gone home before the bombing took place. And one of the decisions we had to make was that, we had to assume that churches are a target. And our church's name has American in it, which we think doesn't help. So we had to be very open with the youth in all our programs, because we said we as adults can say we are here, we're going to continue with our work. But as young people, you have to make your own decisions, talk to your parents, because they could all feel, it's too risky to go and stay at a church at a time like this. But we were quite impressed that most of the exception of two, whose parents stopped them, all the others were like calling us and saying, when are you restarting the program, we want to come back. And so they actually then came back and participated in it. And I said with that, these reflections around this, again, within this context of how do we develop a culture of respect and responsibility and care. So this is the one where they're doing the para drumming and singing with some women organizations in Bangalore town. And then, as we said, there's also time for no work, which is play. So we build that in also into the program, right? So they do things like they had a dance party, they celebrate birthdays of participants. We took them for a boat ride on the lighthouse. At meal times, sometimes they cook together. Then they have film nights. This is the woman who cooks for the program. This is the dormitory they share with each other. And on the left is when they went on a boat ride, and on the right they're doing some sports and games by the beach in Kalladi in Bangalore. And finally, we had to come up with a name for this program, because we started it, we had all these ideas, and we knew it would be an interesting program, but we had no name. And we didn't want to just put some dull name like women's leadership, it's like we need something. So finally they themselves came up with it, which is Anavar, right? Which is She Will Rise.
She Will Rise.
Right? So the young women themselves came up with the title for the program. Right? So for the future, that's how we will refer to the program. It will be called Anavar. So this is the part that Meera was keen that I should present to everybody here, so I'm doing that. So this is what the program costs. There's two parts to it, because next year we want to send them for 6 months of full-time English study, so they get that grounding for all of them. And that's cost $680 per student and $11,000 for 15, which we're projecting as. And then there'll be this program for 4 months. And that's a bit more costly, and I'll explain why. It's $830 per student, or $12,500 just about for 15 students. Because the costs cover accommodation, meals, travel. They sometimes have to go home and come back, or field work, field trips, things like that. That there are resource persons, some who we do have to pay for to come and spend the time doing the work with them. And then learning materials. So one of the things with this program is, though it's as our church program we have organized it, the leadership of it we have given to women from community organizations. So in effect our role is to host it, provide the accommodation, the organizational support, but the leadership of it is all been done by women who are well known in the region as women's rights activists or NGO leaders. So they also, some of them have to be paid, because if they're setting aside their time to do this. And it includes also things like costs for a youth worker who supports them, and like the cook who is cooking for them and things like that. Right? And so ideally we want to run it definitely for a couple more years to do a bit more learning. And then the idea is that this kind of program can be then shared out, so that then we can look at, instead of residential, can you run it throughout the year, like on Saturdays, while they're in the community, can we run something like this already? Can we develop something like this for boys? And so it's a key part of that programming, thinking of how do we help youth, as I said, who come with all these challenges through the system before they go into studies or vocational training or into life, so that they're really equipped to take on that with some sense of self-direction, greater self-confidence, and also some vision now about society that they have, that they will be better citizens at the very least. Right? And we are going to keep track with all of them. So we already have a WhatsApp group they'll be communicating with. One of them, we managed to get a scholarship to go to India this year. She's already gone. Another one is going to study English more intensely, because she's now thinking about her studies. We're going to help her with that. So hopefully this is going to become a model for many other programs. I said a long-term aim is to really have a strong youth program where you can see them coming through either these children's homes, communities, have a program like this, go off to either vocational studies or university studies. Then hopefully some of them come back as youth workers and work with us, and then get more professional training, because our biggest challenge, perhaps more than the funding, is the lack of people. We don't have good English teachers to work with youth like this. We don't have good counselors to work with youth like this. We need a few teachers who are educationalists who can deal with the education part. So the idea is that this is a long-term aim, is to try to develop something like a strong youth institute or a youth program, which can maybe be connected with a community college if that also takes off. But this is kind of like a key component in this, to have a program like this after they finish school, to help prepare them for life, really. So thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, please ask. I'll be happy to.
There's only one center like this, or one place? Or?
Yeah.